So I'm Ted Barnett. I've been a Rush resident for the last 32 years, so I'm almost a native, I guess. And we're here tonight with a bunch of our neighbors who are concerned about protecting the environment and preserving Parkland in our town. And I'd just like to thank various members of the official town structure who are here, Jerry Ducey on the town board, and Pat Krause and Julie Letterman from the Conservation Board. So I appreciate your coming. And we'd like to start the evening with a presentation by Ashley Firsch, who is the lab manager at the McCart Lab in the Department of Entomology at Cornell University, and the bee expert.
Great. Much shorter, yes. Hello. So I'm here today to talk to you about pollinators and why they're important to us, and what we can do to help.
Projector.
Yeah, you might have to get the projector. Let's start with the mouse.
Please stand by. We are temporarily
Yes,
experiencing
thank
technical
you.
difficulties.
There we go.
There we go. We've got a preview. All right. Thank you very much. Okay, so I have some goals for everybody here today. I'm hoping that by the end of the talk, you all will be able to, at least to some extent, answer these 4 questions. So I want you to understand who are the pollinators that we're actually talking about today, why are they important to us, why are they doing poorly, and then a little bit about what we can do to actually help them. These are a lot of things to go through, so bear with me. All right, so here are some pictures of some bees that if you went out in your backyard, you would actually probably see most of these. These are very common bee species in New York State. So can anybody name any of them, or does anybody know anything about the pollinators you find typically in your backyard?
There's a honeybee up there, I'm sure.
There is a honeybee, you got one. Any others that you think are pretty common?
Wasps.
There's no wasp up there. I tricked you. That is a bee. It is a parasitic bee, and it goes into the nests of other bee species and lays its eggs there.
Which one is that?
This red one, the second over, right? So it does look very wasp-like. They're beautiful bees. Any others?
Sweat.
There's a sweat bee, that green one up there. We also have a Bombus impatiens. That's the common eastern bumblebee in the top left corner. We have carpenter bees. We have some other Bombus species. And we have one that isn't a bee at all. Can anybody guess which one it is?
The one in the bottom corner.
It sure is. So that little face belongs to a hoverfly. They are also super important pollinators in this area. So I'm talking about bees today because it's what I know, it's what I study, it's what I love. But we have pollinators that are bats, birds, beetles, some wasps even, moths, butterflies, right? And all of these are experiencing the same stresses that bee pollinators are experiencing. So the details might not be the same, but the general idea applies to most other pollinators. All right, so these are 11 really diverse species of bees that you can find just in your backyard, but we actually have about 420 species in all of New York State. So you can imagine once you get to learn about all of these, it gets really incredible the lifestyles that they have. All right, so what I think is really important to go through a little bit today with everybody is to just get you all to understand what the life cycle of a bee actually looks like. We all think about bees and we think about the adult form, the ones with wings that are flying around visiting flowers, but that's not how most bees spend the majority of their lives. The majority of the bee's life is spent in its nest. So the adults emerge usually in early spring in this area. The males and females mate. The female goes on to build a nest to collect pollen and nectar to feed her brood. She lays those eggs hatch, they turn into the larvae, so we're now into the spring and the summer. Those larvae are eating and growing and growing. Then we go into the fall and the winter. They're in the nest, they're just waiting for the spring to come, and then once it starts to get warmer, once those environmental cues allow them to, they emerge from their nest as adults after pupating. So this is just like the life cycle of a butterfly, right? But a little bit different. It's similar for social bees, except that the time scale is a little bit different, but the sentiment is the same, that they're spending the majority of their life cycle as a larvae in the nest. All right. Oh, there we go. All right, so what are these nests that these bees are actually inhabiting? The first is cavity nesters, right? So this makes up about 30% of the bees. And these are all of the bees that live or build their nests above ground. So this can include honeybees that are feral colonies that live in little holes in trees. This includes things like bees that will burrow into the stems of plants and lay their eggs and put their pollen. You can see this in the bottom corner. And it even includes little bees that build their nests inside of old snail shells, which is awesome. The rest of the bees, the majority of them, 70% of them, are soil nesters, right? So these are bees that are living underground. This includes bumblebee species, which go into the old dens of mice typically, and they start to build their colony and occupy that space. This also includes bees like the mining bees and drenids, and those actually dig into the soil, they build little tunnels, they collect pollen and make little pollen balls, which I think you can see there, and that's what they lay their eggs on, and that's, again, where the bee is spending the majority of its life, growing in the ground. All right, and then there's lots of other ways that we describe the bees that we have here in New York State. They can be specialists, meaning they only forage on maybe one type of plant. They can be generalists, meaning they visit all kinds of different plants. They can be managed honeybees. There are wild species. There are long-tongued and short-tongued bees, and the length of their tongue corresponds to the size of the flower they visit. They can be solitary, one bee in a nest, or they can be social with tens of thousands of bees in a nest. They can carry pollen in different ways, right? So these bees are amazing. They have very, very different life histories and very different places that they occupy in our ecosystems. Okay, so why are bees important to us? I'm going to have you answer this question because I'm willing to bet that some of you have an idea of why we care about them. Any takers? We can have food, right? And so they're doing this through pollination. Does anybody know, can they describe what pollination actually is? Yeah, exactly. So the bees are actually transferring the pollen from one flower to another. That causes fertilization, then it forms seeds and a fruit, which we eat. But we're not the only ones eating fruits. Remember that bees are part of larger ecosystems. So they're really forming the basis for a lot of different arenas, right? They're pollinating wild plants that form berries that birds eat, right? In addition to pollinating the plants that we eat. So this is a little graph that's just showing you some of the agricultural plants in New York State that rely on pollinators. This includes apples, berries, squash plants, cucumbers. And what you can see here is that there's portions of these that are, the very bright picture, and then the other portion that is kind of white over, right? And that portion that's white is the portion of that agricultural crop that is actually pollinated by honeybees, and the rest of it is pollinated typically by wild bees. So the really big example here is strawberries. Strawberry plants require multiple species of pollinators to visit in order to actually form that full big strawberry fruit that we want to eat in the store. We don't have multiple species available, it's just this kind of shriveled up weird mess. And so when we're thinking about conservation of pollinators for agriculture, we can't just focus on honeybees, we have to remember that the wild bees are also playing a big role. All right. So we're all here because bees are in decline. So they're really important to us, but their numbers of the populations are actually going down. And we know this primarily because of honeybees and bumblebees. So honeybees are kind of one arena. This is really what we're talking about is an agricultural animal. When we talk about colony losses, what we really need to be concerned about is the huge economic consequences from losing these colonies for the beekeepers in the area, for agricultural plants that are really, really heavily reliant on those honeybees. And then the other arena is the wild bee pollinators. And so a lot of that data, again, is from the bumblebees. One bumblebee was actually put onto the endangered species list, the rusty patched bumblebee. Many of these species are contracting in their range, and what that means is that we're not finding these bees in the places where we historically have found them. The data for other wild bees is kind of not available, right? There's not very much information on what used to be here, so we don't have as great information on what should be here and no longer is. So that's a really big area where we need to do more research. All right, so we know they're in decline. Why are they in decline? There are a lot of reasons. And so the general consensus right now by all scientists is that it's not one factor that's contributing to pollinator declines. It's all of these things plus a few other things that are all stressors on the bees acting together and causing them to decline in their health. So I can only talk very briefly about all of these, but feel free to ask me more questions about all of these afterwards. The first one is just changes to habitat in general, and so what this generally means is that you're taking a natural area and we're converting it to agricultural areas or urban areas where the resources that used to be available to bees in terms of the nesting sites and the types of plants that were available are no longer there. In big monocultures, this is a huge problem. We find big losses in diversity of bees and just the number of bees in general. And if you, for regular agricultural areas like we have in New York State, it's just a different community of bees that comes in than what used to be there. Pests and pathogens. This, again, a lot of the research is done on honeybees and bumblebees. You can think about this like a school, right? So one kid comes in, that kid's sick, it's in close contact with a lot of other kids, and then they spread their disease all through the school. Those children go out into their respective communities and continue to spread the disease. This is what can happen with bumblebees and honeybees that are managed. They're social insects, so their hive is kind of like that school, just spreading a lot of disease and then sending it out into the bee communities. We don't know yet if those diseases can infect wild bees that are not bumblebees and honeybees, but we do know that they're present. So those wild bees are harboring it. We screened bees that we collected around the Ithaca and Geneva area, and about 50% of the bees that we screened for diseases actually had it in their gut. Whether or not they were sick, we don't know. All right, the next one, agrochemicals. So this is the one that everybody loves to talk about, the pesticides that we use in our agricultural systems. This includes, insecticides, herbicides, fungicides, and miticides. And what I really want you to take home is that bees are encountering these chemicals in the floral nectar and the pollen that they're collecting to eat. They're encountering it in the soil that they're nesting in, and they can encounter it in the water that they're drinking. So lots of different places where they might encounter these chemicals, and a lot of research has been done to see how one chemical, pesticide, can affect a bee's health. But typically in their environment, they're encountering, on average, like 5 different compounds in their nest alone. And so we don't fully understand how encountering a lot of different kinds of pesticides all at once can impact the bee's health. So this is an area of a lot of research right now. And then the last thing, the ever-looming climate change. We already know that for butterfly pollinators, when areas are getting warmer, they can no longer live there, so they might, contract in their range again. They have a smaller area that's cooler where they can live. We hypothesize that bees can be experiencing the same phenomenon, but a lot more research has been done, and most researchers, when they're thinking about pollinator decline, this is kind of something that we have to keep in the back of our head. All right. So, lots of doom and gloom, but there are a lot of things that people can actually do to help. The first is providing habitat. Always provide habitat. You want to have good nesting places for your bees. You want to have floral resources, flowers, so maintaining the ones that already exist, planting new habitats for the bees. We want to ensure that those plants, the water, and the nesting sites are pesticide-free, although we don't understand all of the complexities. We generally understand that pesticides are not great for bees. So trying to remove those from their environment as best as possible is generally good. If we're keeping managed honeybees, we want to be responsible. We want to make sure they're not going to spread disease to the native bee communities as best as we can. And we want to continue to educate people. I think this is the most important one, making sure people understand what's going on, what they can do, and just generally fostering a real love of the environment will do wonders for our communities of bees. All right, so specifics about habitat. This is the really tangible one. This is the one I like to talk about with people. You want to make sure bees have water. Bees need water just like we do. You want to make sure that we're providing some native species for bees to forage on. Species like honeybees, they're pretty indiscriminate. There's some wild bees that require those native plants in order to survive. And if we remove those native plants from the environment, those bees go away. We want to make sure that there are corridors between natural habitats. If you just have little small areas where the bees can live, they're kind of cut off and there's not much movement in the landscape for these bees, which can create lots of genetic problems. We want to make sure that agricultural areas have lots of natural areas surrounding them so that the bees have a place to nest and to reproduce. If you don't have those natural areas for them to reproduce in, then you're not going to get your pollinators in your fields. And then you can create habitat in your home, in your business, and sometimes this looks messy, and sometimes these plants aren't as beautiful as the ornamental plants that we are used to, but you put a little sign up that says pollinator habitat, people tend to feel a lot better about that messy look, right? It's funny how it works, but it's really true. And once you start to educate people on what you're doing and why you're doing it, people become very accepting of it. All right, so in an ideal habitat, also we want to remember resources have to be close together. If we're planting for native bees, they don't fly as far as honeybees, and so for them to have to fly a really far distance to find food is going to really affect their health, and they're not going to reproduce as readily. Again, water. I can't stress it enough. They need water. They need good nesting sites, which means that you want to have undisturbed, bare soil for the soil misters. You want to have dead wood. You want to have trees. You want to have shrubs where all of those cavity nesters can live. And then floral resources, you want to make sure that you're providing resources that bloom from early April all the way until October. Different bees emerge at different times and need different flowering plants at different intervals throughout the summer. Diversity of plants, you want the bees to have a diverse diet just like we do. It's better for them and it's healthier. And we want to have an abundance of each of these species. So you can imagine your bee flying up overhead, there's one little plant, you might not see it, you might not want to stop it. If there's a big patch of coneflower, they're going to see it and they're going to be ready to forage. So this is just an example. This is out front as well. I printed out a few, but just showing you that there are lots of native plants that you can choose from to create this long succession of bloom from April until October. And I can put this up at the end if you guys want to look at the plants. Okay, I couldn't cover everything because this is only a 15-minute talk, and I think I'm probably already at 20 minutes or something. So, if you want to learn more, these got cut off, but Pollinator Network at Cornell, we have information on there that's regarding the New York State native pollinators and the pollinator protection plan that the state has in place about how to keep honeybees, if that's something that you're interested in. There's a lot of resources on that. This is run by Emma Mullen. She's great. You can call her and contact her, and she will talk to you about honeybees especially. The Xerces Society is always a good place to look. They have a lot of fact sheets on how to reduce pesticide use in your home, what plants you can plant in different regions. They have information about citizen science projects regarding pollinators. It's really comprehensive on their information that they provide. So it's always a good place to start to explore this topic. But it doesn't cover everything, of course. And then finally, I just want to say thank you to my lab. These are all of the people that I work with who work every single day to find out more information about the things that I talked to you about. And they're doing a lot of really good research to try to make sure that we understand what's happening with pollinators and we know the best way to help them. So with that, I will take questions.
Anybody have any questions? Yes.
The effect of weather, like really cold winters, does that affect the longevity of the hives being able to
So-
kill all the bees inside? Or?
If I'm thinking
Can you
about,
repeat the question, please?
Questions
Yeah.
about weather?
oh yeah, of course. So she was asking, what is the effect of weather, for example, really long winters, and that are very cold? So what's actually going to affect the bees worse is a change in the weather. So if you have a very long winter, and then it warms up suddenly, they can think it's spring and emerge, and then there's no flowers. So that's what you really want to, that's what we really worry about, especially, so our lab keeps a lot of honeybee colonies, and whenever that happens, we kind of go into panic mode. Over the winter, they're in diapause, which is similar to like a bear hibernating, and honeybees are actually clustering up, and so when they break that cluster, they are expending more energy. They're flying out of the hive, they're looking for resources, but there's nothing available for them to eat. So we have, as honeybee researchers, we have to go out and feed them sugar water. Wild bees don't have that option. So if they're emerging and they think it's spring, and there's nothing to eat, they die. So that's what I'm really worried about, not so much the cold winters, which they're very much used to in this area. They evolved with that very cold winter.
Yeah.
If you don't have water on your property, how do you help yourself be a good habitat?
Yeah, so you can make little ponds. Oh yeah, I'm sorry. So if you don't have water on your property, how do you make good habitat? You can add water. At our lab, that's just outside, we have like really a little dish of water. It's about this wide, and it has little rocks in it, and that's where the bees can land and drink water, and we just refill it like a bird bath. If you have a pond and it's not treated with anything, that's a great place for them to drink. Unfortunately, oftentimes honeybees in urban areas drink out of people's pools, which is fine. But yeah, anything small will work for them as well. Yes.
We found bumblebees down in our basement in, early summer, late spring. Are they
Yeah.
trying to nest down there, or, what do we do to try to save them or find what's going on?
They might be trying, yeah, so you found bumblebees in the basement, which is a new one. I haven't heard of that before. So if they were bumblebees and not honeybees, people often find in the walls of their homes. They just find this little cove and they think, oh, this looks good, nice and warm, I'll live here.
Big.
Bumblebees, that's crazy. Sometimes bumblebees will just nest in like a pile of grass. So that might have been they just finding some, I have no idea. But to get them out of the area, typically people call us and ask. So if there's like a researcher around or a beekeeper, often they have like the little beekeeping suits and they can put that on and we can take them out, and it won't be pleasant, but at least we can relocate the colony. People build nesting boxes for bumblebees, you can put them in one of those. Yeah.
We'll give you the mic.
You want to burn the wood.
Well, no, I'm bringing the wood inside.
Yeah.
There's a bee or two, and then I want to, how do I say?
You just keep them outside. So if there's a bee in a wood pile or you find a bee somewhere and you don't want to kill it, just leave it where it is. So if you bring it in and you find a bee nest in there, put it back outside. It needs to be out there. If you're finding those little piles in your garden, indicating that there's a bee that's burrowed in, you are willing to not dig up that part of your garden for a while and let them emerge. In the spring, they'll emerge and then they'll be gone and they'll find a new nesting spot for next year.
Should I find like a warmer spot for them, like underneath the wood?
You want it to be, if it's in the winter, they need to be cold, or else they think it's spring and they emerge.
Yes, Jen.
First of all, I wanted to volunteer that we have a beekeeping outfit, protection gear, and still a smoker. So if anybody needs that, if you've got bees in your house, just calling,
That's the way.
Identify yourself.
Janet Chase and Jim Chase, who's even braver than me. What would you do with them? We'll talk to Ashley.
Yeah. Email me and
Yeah,
I'll tell you what to do.
well, hopefully you're available 24/7. But actually, I noticed on your PowerPoint that you had that study from Germany, which went over, I think, 30 years or something.
Yeah, so that was.
Could you say a little bit more about that?
Yeah, of course. Thanks for bringing it up. I didn't have time to talk about it. So that was really a study that just was looking at the biomass of flying insects in Germany in this one reserve, and they were collecting, and over, I think, what did you say, 30 years, remember me? 25 years, it was a loss of, oh gosh, 3/4 of the biomass of flying insects. This is not just bees. This is probably a lot of flies and other flying insects, and they don't necessarily know why, but those insects form the basis of a lot of the food chain in those ecosystems, and it's really important. So even when we don't like a lot of the flying insects, like mosquitoes and things like that, that's what's eating bats and birds and other organisms. So that's a huge problem, which I don't have much more information for you other than it's just something to think about. Yeah.
Actually, what I had read is that they had stations all over Germany, 50 or 60 stations over that period, so it's a pretty comprehensive thing, but
Yeah.
yeah, but it's astounding, and I mean, I think maybe the consequence, I wonder, what is the consequence? Maybe part of it is that there's also declining birds, so.
That is very much possible. Yeah, that's something that I've speculated as well. You know, is this because we're trying to kill off mosquitoes to kill off, disease transmission right in humans is a really big concern, but is that affecting our ecosystems? I don't know.
So one more question.
Yeah, and I want to thank you very much. This has been great and very informative. And what I'm trying to do is try to tie it into the situation that we have now in Rush with the property. And I was very impressed with the chart that you showed relative to all the species that can be grown to propagate and try to proliferate all the bee population. And from my understanding of what I've read, that there was a suggestion of a buffer between the water and the farming. And what would your opinion be of like setting 10 acres or something of just those plants to buffer, near the water, up near, it seems like it would be a very logical, collaborative kind of solution to look at that, because pesticides are everywhere. Our friends, we have an apple orchard, and we tried to get honeybees up to our apple orchard, and because it was close to perhaps pesticides within a mile, the beekeeper said no, they didn't want to, and we totally respected it.
Yeah.
But, within that mile radius or whatever, how do you protect? You can't control the entire environment, so there has to be a compromise of some sort. And I was thinking of that chart and looking at all that, the growth that you could plant and to help. I just think that that's a great win-win.
Yeah, so there are lots of people working on this question, and I don't have the specifics, but I can say that it's not going to hurt anything to add more plants, right? So I can't suggest that that would mitigate the effects of pesticides, although I do suppose that adding a lot of good forage and good habitat would reduce one of the stressors, so then the only stressor that you would have is pesticides. That would be great. As far as if that could buffer the spread of pesticides, I know that having plants there will reduce the amount of drift from your sprayers, and that's really important. I don't know exactly how that would affect the bees, but it is not going to harm them to add a bunch of these plants. And there's lots of grants for people who have fields to plant pollinator habitat on their farms, and so that's something that I always like to encourage people to look into, because not many people actually use that money. I don't know what the exact situation is, so I don't know if I can comment.
No, I appreciate that. It was my understanding that the proposal from the farmer was that they would create a buffer, but I don't know who would, quote, buy the seeds to put all that in, but there would be a buffer that the phosphates and such wouldn't go down to the river, and it would be, you know, something that would help do, you know, be a
Yeah.
collaborative kind of thing, so.
Something to think about is that I don't know if these plants specifically are going to be good at creating a barrier. There might be other plants that are really good at absorbing toxins from the environment that would be better in this case, and that's just a very complex ecological issue, but just something to keep in mind while you're talking about this.
Sounds good. Thank you all for your questions, and thank you.
If you have more questions.
That's it? You're going to stick around? You don't have to head back to Ithaca right away?
Oh, email me if you have any more questions. I'm going to check out the
Okay, great, thanks. So now I'm going to turn my script right side up. So I'd like to introduce Carol Ralph, who will share some information about a riverfront parcel which was given to the town of Rush in 2010 by the state of New York, and she makes this presentation on behalf of the Committee to Preserve the 100 Acres. Welcome, Carol.
Great, thanks, Ted. So I'm really impressed with the turnout tonight, and I want to welcome everybody. And as Ted said, I'll be speaking to you tonight as a member of a group of Rush citizens who've been working on a park proposal designed to preserve the 100 acres of Parkland, which in the area is known locally as the Rush Riverside Refuge. Our proposal at its core has these following values. We want to honor the deed for the 100 acres, which restricts uses to only those compatible with park and recreation. To ensure that there's no cost to the taxpayers for the park, we'll enlist volunteers and community partners to help build and maintain the park, protect the character of our rural community, increase access to nature, which improves physical and mental health. Some of our desired outcomes that we want to achieve with our proposal is that we want to see to it that the land remains open and available to the public, as the deed indicates. We'd like to promote farm, recreational, and educational activities related to our town's history as a small family farm community with an interest in New York State specialty crops. Habitat for birds, bees, other pollinators, and wildlife will be maintained and restored as necessary. The almost 50 acres of natural growth forest will be preserved, and trails will be developed to accommodate visitors of all ages and abilities. So how did Rush come to get this park? In 2008, the Rush Town Board entered into negotiations with the state of New York to acquire land that was no longer needed as part of the BOCES and industry complexes. In 2010, the New York State agreed to transfer the land to the town of Rush. The terms of the deed were that the land was to be used for activities consistent with park and recreation, and if the town decided not to adhere to those terms, then the land was to be taken back by the state of New York. Between the years of 2012 and 2017, the town-appointed committee, made up of Rush citizens who volunteered their time, worked to identify recreational activities in farming, science, history, and nature. During the same time, the town also entered into a lease agreement which allowed non-recreational farming on part of the property. In 2017 and again in 2018, the town board passed a resolution to formally request that the state legislature change the deed for that 100.5 acres permanently to allow farming and timbering activities that weren't restricted to recreation. And in both 2017 and 2018, New York State declined to pass that deed change. So here's a map showing the entire 320 acres. The 100.5 acre parcel is outlined in purple. The southernmost end is bordered by Henrietta. Specifically, there's a housing tract adjacent. I'm sorry, the north, I'm on the wrong bullet. The southernmost end of the property is bordered by the Rush-Scottsville Road, also known as Route 251. The northernmost end is bordered by Henrietta. Specifically, there's a housing tract adjacent to the property, The houses that back up to that park are on a street called South End Square. On the eastern side of the parcel is bordered by the Bosse's property where the Monroe County Fair is currently being held, and where the Railroad Museum is. And then on the west side is the Genesee River. The western border is more than a mile along the Genesee. The property is located in a floodplain that contains federally recognized wetlands and streams. There are 4 fields which are separated by hedgerows, native shrubs, mature trees, and drainage streams. At the request of the Rush Citizens Committee, Monroe County Soil and Water performed an assessment in which it recommended protecting the trees and vegetation growing along the banks of the river and between the fields. Those plants serve the important function of shading both the river and the streams, which help to control the growth of algae, and also to filter non-point source pollutants before they enter into the water. The proposal we are sharing with you tonight consists of the following features. The creation of a nonprofit foundation to raise funds from private donations and to seek grants to preserve land. This strategy would ensure no cost to taxpayers and allow for fundraising. By New York State law, towns are prohibited from fundraising, so a separate entity is needed to perform fundraising activities. The proposal also includes implementation of a plan that preserves habitat, removes invasive species, monitors trees, minimizes erosion, maintains trails and signs, and ensures public safety. Best practices provided by expert partners like Monroe County Soil and Water, the Department of Environmental Conservation, and others will be followed to protect natural land features and the watershed. The goal will be to eliminate current non-point pollution from the property and to keep it from entering the Genesee, and to end the use of agrochemicals that harm pollinators and native plants. Volunteer opportunities will be available for the public to get involved with beautification and maintenance activities. Our vision is to create a unique place where visitors can experience nature that has not been damaged by human activity, where they can find havens for birds and other wildlife, learn about the historical riverbed, farm fields, and enjoy the mature forests, wetlands, and riverfront. We'll pursue a partnership with the Rochester and Genesee Valley Railroad Museum. Developing that relationship will be mutually beneficial. The museum and park committees can coordinate plans and activities like the design of walking trails and special events. We can partner with the museum when seeking grants, and that can be used for both land and museum improvements and activities. Our vision is to promote recreational farm activities like creating havens for pollinators by planting native wildflowers and shrubs, beekeeping, tapping existing maple trees for syrup, establishing a memorial tree park by planting oaks and maples, planting specialty crops in partnership with New York State Department of Agriculture and area farmers, as well as historic crop gardens based on existing models. Beautification projects will include the planting of perennial and landscape gardens. So in summary, the 100-acre parcel of land has unique features and a rich history. Its location on Route 251 provides potential to create an easily accessed natural refuge. The mile of the Genesee River that borders the land puts this park on the map. This park offers so many opportunities to develop regional, state, and national partnerships. We don't want this opportunity to slip away unnoticed. So if you support the preservation of the public land or any of the activities in the proposal, your signature on our petition can help make it a reality. If you want to provide your email address, there's a sign-up sheet out in the foyer, and we can keep you included in upcoming activities to preserve the park. And finally, contact your elected officials at the state and local level and express your support for our park and our proposal.
No, we're good.
Marianne, Lisa?
I'm Carol Barnett.
Marianne? Janet Chase.
Cecil Palmer. Christopher Giordano.
Catherine Higgins.
Carol?
So, okay, any questions from the audience? Yes,
Do you have a timeline?
timeline, anybody want to have a time for that?
Well, I have the microphone. So the timeline is really dependent on the town board. You know, the town board, we did try to present our proposal to the town board, and they, at the time, they took it, but they did not respond to it yet. And we have not had a formal presentation, and we're asking for that. What we have done is work together to try to defeat the legislation that would change the deed, and that has been accomplished.
Let me just ask Carol, regarding the timeline. So what do you envision as the whole process? How long will the process take? I think that was partly what you were asking, right? Right. What's the process to develop what we're your vision?
Well, I don't know that we have a finite timeline for that, but one of the first steps was going to be to plant some hay on the fields to try to pull out some of the pesticides that are in there now before we pursue the organic farming opportunities there. We would also have to make the relationships with the other expert partners in order to get a sense of what activities we would be able to pursue, and we would have to also apply for grants.
Yes.
What's your strategy for creating the non-for-profit that's a separate entity?
That's quite easy. It really.
So the question is about creating a not-for-profit. What's the strategy?
Yeah, that is really something we've looked into. One of the models is the Henrietta Foundation. The Mendon has a foundation. Almost every town has one, and it could be more. It could appreciate more than just the park. We can create it so that it could help other activities within the town.
Yes.
So what are some of the objections to doing this? You've heard.
So who has that?
What are people saying about why this should not be done?
What are people saying about why this should not be done? Kelly, why don't you have something? No? Yeah, why don't you pass the microphone down here?
Like I said, we didn't try. I mean, I think in some sense what happened was that when the land was transferred and when the committee was formed to study possible uses, there was a decision to have interim or stopgap use of the property and to let it be rented for commercial farming. And so there was kind of inertia, I think, that takes place, but this is something that the town was used to. And so when the committee came up with its recommendations, they kind of, in my view, kind of went by the wayside. You know, this is something that's familiar, it's been done, and you know, sometimes I think that we don't, so often, you know, we don't believe in things we can't see. You know, it's really lovely in some ways as it is, you know, the waving weed and fields of grain, but the pesticides are real. It's just like x-rays, you know, you don't see them, they can hurt you. You don't see the pesticides, but it can hurt you, it can hurt the bees. You know, you think about going there for a walk, and you ask yourself, well, should I take my children and my dogs? I don't know when it was sprayed. I don't know how long that lasts. My neighbors, and of course in Rush, not so many of our neighbors spray their lawn, but if your neighbors spray the lawn, they put down signs that tell you whether or not you should be careful and avoid it. But, you know, this happens many times a year that it's sprayed. And, you know, some people say, well, this is Rush, and that's what happens. But I think we want something better for this piece of property. We don't necessarily like it if we live among farm fields and our neighbor sprays, but we chose that. But what was chosen for this piece of land was that it should be a park. It should be park and recreation. It should be protected for all the living creatures on it, including us if we want to visit it. And we want to be able to visit it anytime. We've gone there for walks, and you know, we want it to be safe and increasingly safe. We want it to nourish the river and all the living things there.
And we don't believe that commercial agriculture and recreation are mutually compatible. I went for a walk in the park with a friend of mine, and I said, I'm not sure you should bring the dogs. You know, she takes her dogs, you know, whenever we go for it. I'm not sure you should, because I just don't know when they've applied the pesticides. So we think that sustainable agriculture is compatible, but we don't think that commercial agriculture is compatible.
So why is it there?
Yeah,
Why are they?
Well, I believe the town board is truly trying to do their best at maybe making some money for the town.
How much money do they make, you know?
$5,000.
$5,000 a year?
Yes.
My question is kind of a multiple questions. The first thing that I wonder is, this used to be state-owned property that the BOCES campus was on for many, many years. That state-owned property reverted to the town. When the state owned the property, did they do commercial renting of those fields to, you know, the local farmers? And if that's been going on for, it's kind of something that's in perpetuity, you would think. But the other question I have is, what is the town planning for that 100 acres? I'd like to hear both sides of that story. I've heard this side, makes a lot of sense, but what is the other side?
I'll pass this along in a minute, but just we've been trying to see if we could get a description of what's the long-term vision. And as you've seen in this presentation, this group has done a lot of work to try to put together and express that vision. And what they are also trying to do is to actually find out just what you're asking. What does the town want for a long-term vision? And I'll let somebody else answer that. It might be better to address it, but I'm not heard.
So what, the first part of the question was what the land was being used for before. Did you know
Well,
that?
I think first, this parcel that we're really concerned about right now is the 100 acres. And that was formerly the industry property. So when the state, New York State Office of General Services, they have a law that they reach out to communities. And the state's interest is to expand parks and recreation throughout the state. So that is what, whatever happened with industry does not become the setup for the future. It is given a grant, literally a grant to the town for the sole purpose. And quite honestly, it was the Railroad Museum that talked to the town to say, this is an opportunity for you. This is under state law that when they don't want that land. So the second part is that when Rich Anderson was our town supervisor, he appointed, which so town supervisors can, a committee, citizens committee. We had first thought it was going to be a year, but because they had entered into a long-term lease, and it took us a couple years just to get started because of some of the challenges for the chairperson and different health issues. So we spent perhaps about 3 years and came up with a very strong proposal. And we were requested to change that proposal to a litany of ideas, that the town board would then take those ideas and then match them to some of the interests that other people in the community, that we would have sort of a community discussion and have it be anchored and aligned to the comprehensive plan for our town. So this parcel could not have probably been accepted by the town if it had not aligned and was supportive of the comprehensive plan. So you go to that plan and you see that this is listed since the 1990s as green space. So our proposal aligns to that comprehensive plan. The town board has not engaged in that. They've said that they're maybe down the road. But our concern is that the proposal that the town has embarked upon and has engaged a commercial farmer for will devastate this land. It will take the trees and it will take it'll start to have drainage piles, and those hedgerows and all the historical features of that land will be gone. This is not the BOCES property.
So the initial committee was set up by the town?
By by the town board. It was a citizens committee appointed by the town board and authorized to make recommendations for both recreation and recreational agriculture, which we did, and we have file boxes, or I have file boxes, of models and activities that come from all around the country, and in terms of making sure that our town could have a very unique and attractive parcel. And I think it should really be recognized that our town does not have a lot of acreage. We only have one park, Stony Brook Park, and a little mill park that's only about an acre. In comparison to other communities in Monroe County, we do not have public parkland that is available and accessible to our residents. And I think it's a myth that all of us have 10, 20 acres of land. Many of us are on 1 or 2 acres of land, and that a park becomes an amenity for couples, young couples coming in with their children. And the other myth is that no one wants to use that land, which our town board has said is that no one will go to this land. And that should be challenged based on the really concrete evidence in our state of the interest in having bikers and outdoor living. And we would get very many grants to help sustain Genesee River. There was $50 million brought into just the city of Rochester to start to make sure that the river is our greatest attraction. So I don't think we can speak for the town board, but I think those are questions that we would really welcome people here raising that. But our goal was to really try to present to the community our interest in saving pollinators and also in terms of saving this park. You can see how passionate.
Before we go on, how many people have actually walked and been over to that property? So a lot of you have been over there. So, you know, there's a mile of riverfront. And you know what towns pay for a mile of riverfront? They pay millions of dollars for a mile of riverfront. So I think that's something to keep in the back of your mind. It's also covered with black walnut trees, mature black walnut trees. It's quite remarkable if you take a look. So, yeah, go ahead.
Just on your point, in the town of Penfield, have you heard of Shadow Pines? So the town approved to purchase 212 acres, and they approved a bond for $3.6 million. And 80% of the voters approved it. So they actually approved to buy land, and we already had it given to us. It's a gift. And I don't know if you heard about Brighton, it's 26 acres of land, and they did the same thing, just back in May.
Yes.
So, my question wasn't meant to disparage what you're doing, but was to ask, this, what you're saying eminently makes sense. You know, this is a once in a lifetime opportunity. It's not managed properly, you go away and never come back. So there are things that can be done now that can't be done in 5 years from now, 10 years from now. They cut down all the trees and plow down the rest of the land. So my question was, does somebody else have another plan? Or are they just, you know, not sure what they're going to do? So is there some other people who are saying, no, it should be farming, we want farming, and we're going to gather our forces together and try to get the town to make it farming, or not? Or is the town just sort of follow?
So when, on May 9th, when we were speaking to the town board, they did take the opportunity to address us with their vision. And what I recall being said at the time was that they wanted to use the property to raise the money by leasing the land at $100 an acre. And they wanted to use that money to for upkeep of the buildings that are on the Bosie's property in part. But then long term, what they had said was they didn't see why doing what they were doing now, licensing it to be farmed commercially, why that was not compatible with a park vision for the long term. But that they didn't have anything set in stone right now, that they would see what happens in the future, but for now they just wanted to address
the immediate concern of collecting the money to help with the buildings.
Yes.
What do you need us to do?
Sorry?
What do you need us to
What is
do?
it? Oh,
Well, no, I mean.
No, I understand, yeah.
Can I help, all right?
Yeah.
So just, can you give us some ideas on what we can do?
yep. Let's answer. We'll answer more questions first, and then we'll get to that. Did you want to say something, Mary?
No, I think it is a good question though to ask the town board because we, I think most of us want you to be a critical thinker and we want the best for the town. So I think it is good to ask the town board, what is it? If you ask the town board, it's a fair question that, what is best for the town and what is their vision?
Is there somebody from the town board who actually wanted to answer that question, or?
There's another question
Oh,
here.
question here. Okay. Yeah.
If the reason the town board thinks that the farming would make money for the town, so that money can be used to upkeep the buildings and things that are there, the old barns.
Buildings are on a different site than the Parkland, are they not?
But it's maintaining the property.
It's all one piece of property that
Yeah,
the town
right.
of Rush has, but
So my question is, would any grants or anything that you can get be used to fix those barns and things instead of the town needing to get the money from the farming?
Well,
So repeat the question.
well, the question is, could we, as a foundation, seek grants that could help the town restore the buildings on the Bosse's property? If we do the foundation, it will be more global than just the 100 acres. So yes, the answer is yes, and I think the opportunities are there. And I think the opportunity to have a community-based nonprofit that also engages other partners, including the state, and also Fish and Wildlife, we could do that.
Can you explain what buildings we're talking about?
Well, the buildings are on the Bosse's property, but
And what kind of buildings are they?
some are farm buildings. Some buildings will be renovated based on the county fair.
Well, and that was my understanding, is
Yeah.
that the buildings there, when they approved the county fair coming in and taking possession of it, was that the county fair took on that responsibility to renovate those farms. It was not going to be a town funded project, but it was the county fair, that was part of the agreement. So if that's what they're arguing, then I'm confused.
Well,
Can you explain what you just said?
her understanding was that the town had sought support by the county fair to restore the buildings. But I think the investment is quite limited compared to what the cost for the buildings were. We had done, Cecil was on the committee, as well as Mary Ann Rizzo and myself, and we did extensive research to see what the cost for repairing and renovating those buildings were. And one of our major questions was utilization. So we were very supportive, even within our proposal, to have activities such as 4-H, any kind of farm-based activities. So we were very supportive of that, but what the question was sustainability, and the question was investment to make sure the buildings were safe. There is money coming that the town is spending to insurance and different costs, but were able to get a grant for, I think, the Railroad Museum roof. So the town can do grants, but they can't do fundraising. They also can't do some grants from nonprofits that want community-based support. So there's opportunities there, but I think it goes back to your question, what is the vision for the town? And I think that becomes a real question. But it isn't all about money. I can't imagine that it is, because they gave a lease that was much less money than it was before, and they had done an open bid and came up with $140 an acre, and then they gave it for $100 an acre. But the major concern is that it's the timbering, it's the removal of the hedgerows, it's the decimation of the natural streams, it's the installing of the drain tiles, and those are activities that will forever alter and decimate this land, and it's not necessary. So one of the questions that had been raised was, could we do could we do both? Could we have 10 acres here and could we do that? Well, the beauty of this land is that across is 1,000 acres that the industry still owns. Across the river, there certainly is commercial farming, but this land is pretty historically set. The hedgerows, Jack Gaffney told me that hedgerows are a lost art, but these were hedgerows that have been in place at least probably since the early part of the 19th century. So we can study this, and I think Cecil, if you could take just a couple minutes, one of our goals was to have partnerships with the community colleges and RIT, and have the kind of science that you're speaking about, for us to be a resource to our area colleges, to recognize that Rush may be small, but we are part of a county that is quite remarkable in its colleges and universities, and we could be a center, and we would be what Carol says, a gem on the Genesee. So we have an opportunity that truly you're saying, if we miss it, we will lose that.
Question back there?
No, I guess I'm just resonating with all of I totally believe in what you're trying to do. So I guess I'm trying to take action and go, what is it that we have to do to collaborate to have the town board see this vision more clearly, because it is a unique resource, and what message are they getting to be more collaborative and come up with a solution together? I guess I'm struggling with how to position this to see the value and move forward.
Okay, so just a quick word on that. I think the intent has been for a while to have that kind of discussion, and there's been a change in administration, and for sure the town has, well, we don't know what the long-term vision is. I certainly believe that they have well intentions, but without an open discussion forum, how do we know? How do we exchange ideas?
Right.
How do we put forward, some ideas that might be complementary? Maybe they're in conflict, but without a discussion, it doesn't go anywhere. And so that's what a lot of the effort has been to try to do that.
You take a question on this side?
Oh, sure, I'm sorry. Yeah, yes.
Were they invited today?
Yes, everybody's invited.
Except for Jerry, but
Jerry's here.
Just kidding. There was an over.
So there was one minute for that. Yes.
Jerry, obviously we did highlight who came from any of our town boards or planning boards.
I apologize, I cannot hear what you're saying. I still can't hear what you're saying.
You must not have been here when we first...
I'm old, but it don't work well.
You're
a treasure.
You're in very good company. We did highlight everyone who came from any of the town board or planning board, but you must have been a little late. So Jerry Kusi is from our town board, and we had people from our conservation board, but we invited everyone. And it was really an opportunity for us to do what the town board said that they were moving forward with continuing the lease and the license. So we thought what we could do is start to have more educational forums in the community and try to engage more partners, because as you can see, we're doing the best we can, but we do not have the power to move forward. We've been meeting with the town supervisor and town board whenever we could. We've been highlighting the importance of riparian buffers. We've been bringing up the issues that are the legal issues of trying to live within the deed. We've been working very diligently for a couple years with only the goal of trying to save this land and save it for the town of Rush for now and for the future. So we need help.
So I want to get questions from this side. Yeah. Yes.
This is the first that I heard that we even had land, so I'm assuming that I'm not the only person out there. So how do we get the word out that this is, first of all, property of Rush, and second of all, in danger? To me, that would be instrumental in getting the people behind you, and that the board might have to take a little bit more seriously.
Right.
So part of what has been,
Hold the microphone in front of your mouth and try to.
so, sorry. So part of the effort has been to try to get word out that this exists and trying to find a forum to do so, to spread word, because we know that a lot of people don't even know that it exists or what's being done or what could be done. You know, you talk to neighbors and it's like, well, I knew that was there, but haven't seen anything happen. So, you know, that's part of what these people are trying to do. And as far as resources, they're all over the place. You got very hardworking people here. I'm just on the sidelines. But where can you tap? You can tap all the universities, Brockport, Genesee, Cornell. Sorry. So anyway, let me pass it over to Cecil, let him have some say.
Put your book down and wave your other arm. It's Italian.
I'd like to follow up a little bit on the buildings there. When the committee first started, we did an inventory of all the buildings that they have there. And most of them are in pretty bad shape. It's my understanding now that the county fair has funds to put a new roof on the horse barn. But the building itself needs additional work besides putting a new roof on it.
Can't hear you.
Closer.
You guys can move up, too. It's okay to move up, Jerry.
Anyway, the buildings are not in that good a shape. You have a cattle barn, there's a milk barn next to it, so they step on this mic.
You want to take the podium instead of that mic does have a high and low cutout, so it's not hitting it right.
You'll have to forgive me. I'm going to be celebrating my 80th birthday in a couple of weeks. I don't have as much energy then as I did 20 years ago. But anyway, we did an inventory on all the buildings, and the buildings are not in the best of shape. In the business that I was in before I moved to Rush, we were in the chemical business, making home use type products for lawn and garden. And the owners of that business decided they wanted to get into real estate. And one of the rules of thumb that they had is they would have to have a need for that building. They'd have to have a tenant for it. We had a broker that would go out and find Ford Motor or a bank or somebody like that that needed space next year. They might need 150,000 feet, or we may need 300,000. But the owners of the business said, we need to have a need for the building before we invest in it. And that's what we have here. We have, I think, about 9 different buildings there that are in real bad shape. Now, for us to say to the town, yeah, that's fine, you're getting revenue from farming, and you're going to take that, whatever it is, $5,000 or $6,000, how far is that going to go? That's not going to go very far. But even then, if they had enough money, why put money in a building that's in bad shape if you don't have a use for it? You have to have a use for something before you make an investment in it. And I don't see that happening here. So somehow, this all has to come back to possibly a master plan for the property. The 100 acres down by the river and the other 200 acres there, combined we got 300 beautiful acres. It can be managed and managed properly, but we're not on track. We need to have the town develop a master plan for what they intend on doing and be very cautious about spending money on buildings, and maybe 10 years from now you may want to tear it down because you don't have a use for it. The square footage in most of these buildings isn't very big, and you can spend a lot of money and not have use of it. Go ahead.
I guess I'm wondering, isn't the town accountable for following the agreement that the state gave? It's a no-brainer.
So the question is the town accountable for to what the deed originally said?
So that is part of the reason why they pursued the legislative change, so that they could.
But how can they do that without a vote? How can they make that decision?
you explain the legislative process that they're going through?
I think these are questions you really have to go back to the town board, because our goal is really not to argue with the town board, it's really to try and rally sufficient support, start to address that some people do not know about the land. We've explained that numerous times that a lot of people don't know that they went to try to change the deed, that it wasn't in the newsletter, that it wasn't reported. Sometimes there's certainly a large sentiment that a lot of times people just have to learn by going to town board meetings, and some people don't. But our goal tonight was really, and we just wrap it up because people are starting. We don't want to take everybody this evening, but the goal really now is to get more support, have people get the sort of the background and the history that we've been going through. We were able to keep this legislation from going forward in the state legislature, and we feel very concerned that it even came to the floor of the Senate, that we had called every senator to say that there were errors in this legislation, and it still went through because it's home rule legislation, and we're in our state legislature honors home rule. But it was faulty legislation, and it should have more checks and balances at that level. So we are writing position papers to say this should never happen in any town or community. So we're trying to have truth prevail at that level, and we were successful this year. But it could come back next year as a legislation, or they could go for Parkland alienation. So our primary goal now is to have a better proposal, something that will save this land. And while we're concerned about the Bosse's property, it's a very different parcel. This land should be sustained on its own. The deed is different. The land is the mile on the Genesee River. And the Bosse's property probably needs a different review, just like Cecil says, a much more utilization review, much more in-depth study, and really recognize what can happen and how much is it going to cost to do that. And the foundations could certainly help do that. But for our goal right now is to save this 100 acres from being decimated and lost to future generations. And no matter how you cut it, if you take away those hedgerows, if you take away those buffers, if you put drain tiles in and you timber that land, it'll never be the same again. So that's what we're here for. So we have lots and lots more information, but we try to make it 15 minutes. So.
Well, we can go a little longer here. President Carroll.
I know there are more questions, but I just want to make a plea before anybody starts to disperse that if you could please sign the petition, consider signing it, please sign it tonight, and also leave your name and email address if you're not already on the Rush citizens list, because I monitor that and I'm very careful. I don't share your information. I keep your privacy, and I only tell you about events like this. So, for example, somebody asked the question, I think we'll return to it, like what can I do? One thing you can do is that if we were to have an opportunity to present a proposal before the whole town, we would want all of you there to listen and to speak and to share your ideas about this property, because truly there are so many people I've heard from that they didn't know this piece of property existed, and that shouldn't be so.
I just want to say, I think we can have a really productive relationship with the town. We've had some good discussions and some difficult discussions, but everybody's ideas are important. That democracy takes a lot of work and it's messy, but everyone's ideas are important, and everyone speaking up is important.
So, any other questions? Yes, Vince.
How do you get there? Is there parking to walk?
It's a little, how do you get there? Can I explain that?
Well,
And where you can park?
You can park right on 251. The challenge, I think, is that the fields are being tilled right now. But you can talk to Mary Ann, and she'll meet you over there and show you how to get through it.
Well, there's a road off East River Road. Does that go back there?
Well, it goes back to the river, and that's one reason why I'm a disability rights advocate. So I would love to have this 100 acres be designed so that people would have easier access.
I sent a couple who are quite elderly, I think older than you, Cecil, and they had quite a long hike, and then they got pretty anxious being way in those woods. But the 251 entry would get you in there a little bit easier. So, but you can get to the river through the Bosse's land, and there's trails and markers.
And it's going to be a walk.
We're having a walk this Saturday at 10 o'clock, and if you can meet us right west of the Transportation Museum, and right on 251. The Railroad Museum on 251, right across from Industry.
So it's the other end of the railroad museum, right?
Yeah, the Railroad
Oh, one's called
Museum.
transportation. Okay, got it.
Plus, the Railroad Museum has offered to let us use their parking, so if you don't want to park on the verge of 251, you can go into their parking. And they also said there's some parking on the other side of the road across from them, which I can't exactly visualize, but should there be a lot of people who show up for the walk, that might happen to just, in any case, be careful crossing the road if you do that.
If anybody wants to put together a flotilla to go along the 1 mile, I would love to go canoeing or kayaking. I think that would be really great. Because I think really that may be, that's really an untapped resource. If we had places we could pull in and get out and have a picnic, it would be just lovely. Because that's a mile's a long, it's a pretty long way.
The county has a ropes course back there. Is that where it is?
Yes.
Well, that was on the Bosse's property. That was part of the road course is no longer there now.
It's actually that way that you disposed there. It was along the Genesee River. It wasn't
I think we're having private conversations here. So this is about the ropes course?
yeah, the ropes course was right along the river.
So there's a ropes course along the river. Okay.
It's not there.
So any sort of questions about where we go forward? How we go, what next steps? Any questions about that? So Mary, you want to say
Well, you can pick up a map, there's maps out there, and you can see exactly how to get there.
All right, so we'll stick around for people to ask questions, and thanks all for coming.